When I think of the word hood, I often think of a person, a place, and perhaps even a thing. I'm Sir Creepsta, and welcome to Muhlenberg County Ghost Stories from the Hood. Tonight's tale of terror is entitled Woman in White, Banshee of Central City. When it comes to the strange and the unknown, for some reason, more often than not, it seems as if the later it gets at night or early morning, the more active the things lurking in the dark become, drastically increasing one's chances of running into anything remotely supernatural. Tonight's tale of terror is a prime example of just that. So sit back, relax, grab some snacks, and be terrified by yet another Muhlenberg County ghost story from the hood. The year was 1979, and as an incoming junior, I was in hog heaven to say the least. Reason being was that the upcoming basketball season was right around the corner, and we were definitely playing with a stacked deck, seeing we had a team that was loaded with both veterans and some darn good underclassmen. To pass the time away, while I was home awaiting the upcoming season, I bought myself an Atari gaming system with the money that I had saved through the summer work program our school had offered. From the moment that I first opened it, I immediately fell in love with the game, especially one of the games that it offered that was called Combat. Combat was a simple game that consisted of you and your opponent firing bouncing bullets at one another, trying to destroy each other's army tanks. After playing the game for about a month, I had gotten pretty good at it. One of our family's closest friends was a guy we called Cheat Man. Cheat Man would come to our house on a regular basis to chill out with my younger brother, seeing that the two of them were around the same age, and had pretty much so grown up together. On one of his many nights visits to our house, he noticed me playing the game and immediately insisted that I allow him to play it with me, which was fine with me, seeing that I had grown pretty bored at playing the game on a nightly basis by myself. So when he asked, I didn't hesitate to let him play. And from that night on, each time that he was at the house, we would engage in a nightly battle one-on-one playing Combat. Time after time and night after night, we would play Combat, with the results always turning out the same, which were me whipping his butt regularly. The game was so fun that time would usually slip by on us without us even knowing it. And before we knew it, it would be midnight, or even later at sometimes. Usually we would try to stop around midnight, seeing that we both had to be at school the next morning. After developing a noticeable pattern in the first 2 months of playing Cheat Man, it stuck out like a sore thumb when I first started noticing him wanting to leave earlier than he normally did. At first I thought it was because he was tired of the nightly whippings that I was dishing out to him. So I'd laugh at him and tease him about trying to avoid the obvious outcome. Nonetheless, he would just look at his watch, stare me in the face, and say his goodbyes. Then out the door he would go, with this strange, almost frightened look on his face. By now I've become very curious as to what was going on with my friend, because it was completely out of character for him to suddenly start acting so strangely. So after about 2 weeks of this odd behavior, from almost religiously making sure that he left our house before midnight, I had no choice but to ask my friend what was going on with him. So when I saw the perfect opportunity to hit him with the question of what had brought this sudden change, I jumped on it, asking him what's been up with him these last couple of weeks, and why does he look so frightened when he suddenly realizes how close it is to midnight, seeing that he only lives about 3 or 4 minutes away, right up the street from our house. The look on his face cut right into my soul. I could actually see the fear in his eyes, as well as hear it in his voice when he answered me. Realizing that it was nearly midnight, he looked at me and he said, "Man, I have to get home now, but I promise that I will tell you why I've been acting this way tomorrow at school." with my guts about to explode from holding back the laughter. I looked at him and I said, okay. For the remainder of the night, I barely slept, just from the anticipation of getting to school in the morning and hearing his excuse that he was about to give me for having to leave my house before midnight. I spent the entire next day at school trying to track Cheap Man down, primarily because I was about 3 years older than him and we had an entirely different class schedule. It wouldn't be until my after-school basketball practice that I would finally run into Cheap Man. When I did, the two of us went to the back of the gymnasium, sat down on the bleachers, and he began to tell me his reasons for his sudden change. According to my friend, about 2 weeks earlier, he had left my house like he normally did, which was around 12 or so, and he was making his normal walk home when he thought he had spotted something or someone coming from the top of the hill by his house. It was a very foggy night, so at first glance, he said it was hard for him to make out who or what was coming his way. Because of his poor visibility, he took off his glasses and wiped them off while he was standing under the light at the cross-section between our two houses. Soon after putting his glasses back on, he said he could clearly make out that something or someone was definitely coming from the top of the hill, and not only was it a person like he had assumed, but that it was in fact a woman dressed in an all white, riding a white horse, and that she was straddling the horse the way the woman does when they happen to be wearing a dress. At this point, he told me that his first reaction was to just simply turn around and come back to my house, because his gut feeling was telling him that this was definitely something out of the ordinary, especially for it being just happening this time of the morning. But no matter how hard he tried to do that, his legs would not allow him to do so. He told me that it wasn't just the fright that kept him from hightailing it back to my house, but it was something else keeping him from being able to move his legs. As the woman in white got closer to him, he said that at one point he thought that he was going to pee on himself out of fear. He then told me that the horse just suddenly stopped in its tracks and just stood there with the two of them facing in his direction. And out of nowhere, the woman on the horse let out a loud scream. He said that the scream was so loud it felt as if his eardrums were going to burst. According to Cheap Man, the scream seemed to have lasted for about 10 seconds, and then the horse and the woman in white turned towards the field leading to Gish Park, which is located between the Phelps house and the ditch. Helplessly standing there, he told me that he watched the two of them gallop across the grass, appearing as if the horse and its rider were walking on thin air. He told me that he continued to watch them through the fog, and by the time they'd reached the basketball court, it seemed as if the two of them just vanished into thin air. At that point, he said that whatever it was that had kept him from moving suddenly allowed him to go free, and that he struck out running as fast as he could toward his house, literally scared out of his mind. After hearing this story from Cheap Man, I immediately felt bad at the way that I had been teasing him up to this point for wanting to leave my house before midnight, and I quickly apologized to him for it, telling him that had it happened to me, I'm sure that I would have reacted the same way that he did. Cheap Man and I would both grow up and go our separate ways in life, and to this very day his mom and his sister still live in the house that they grew up in. There have been many times that upon seeing each other that I can't help but to bring up the woman in white to Cheap Man, while carrying on our conversation with one another, never forgetting to ask him whether or not he has seen her anymore. And each time I do, he gives me the same exact answer, which is no, I haven't, and thank God. But he also told me that deep down in his heart and his soul, he knows that she's still out there somewhere, roaming the hoods of Central City late at night, ready to terrify some unlucky soul with that devilish scream and that loud holler. I am Sir Creepsta, and until next time, stay terrified.